Welcome back, everyone. Today I'll be showcasing the best Pokemon fan games and ROM hacks that were released or updated in the last 30 days. Just a reminder that this is a monthly series, so be sure to subscribe if you never want to miss out on any of them, which, trust me, you don't. But let's not waste any more time and get straight into the games. Let's kick this video off with the first completed fan game of 2025. An adventure that continues the story of Ethan or Lyra after the events of Heart Gold and Soul Silver. In HCSS Sevi Islands, you're invited to, well, the Sevi Islands, to capture the legendary Pokemon Entei and Raikou. However, you'll quickly find yourself facing off against Team Rocket and start to hear rumors about Giovanni's return. So the story is pretty good. It's not groundbreaking, but it does a great job of taking you through the game, and definitely has some interesting and cool moments. But the game also starts you out a lot differently than you would in a normal Pokemon game. You'll first pick 3 starters, one from Johto, Kanto, and Hoenn respectively, as well as a handful of Pokemon to take with you, plus the box legendary from the version you picked, as well as Suicune, Celebi, and a few others. So you'll have a nice amount of Pokemon to build your team out of from the very start. But if you aren't a fan of those options, the game does feature Pokemon from the first 4 generations, as well as nearly every canon regional variant, and even Paradox Pokemon. But the ultimate surprise this game has is the entire Hoenn region as a post-game, with all its gym leaders to challenge in any order, as well as over 20 new side quests. However, this game isn't perfect. While the sprites in battle are animated, the moves themselves significantly lack animations, and the ones that do exist look very basic. Additionally, the only way to speed up the game is by holding down the shift key, as there currently isn't a toggle, something I do hope gets fixed. But even with those nitpicks, HCSS Sevi is still a game I highly suggest you play, as it was just recently finished, nearly 5 years after it was announced. Pokemon Emerald is a pretty good game, but one of my biggest pet peeves is having to replay through the Hoenn region. Something I've had to do way too many times while playing through various enhancement hacks. But Pokemon Emerald Mini solves that exact problem by introducing a version of Hoenn that's been scaled down a lot. By doing this, your playthroughs will feel a lot quicker, which is something I noticed when I defeated the second gym leader after just 20 minutes of playing, making it an incredible hack for Nuzlocke, or other challenges where you might find yourself resetting more than once. But other than that, the gameplay is just vanilla Pokemon Emerald with some small quality of life changes, like the ability to acquire trait evolutions without trading. However, I do want to say that this is an incredibly fun concept for an enhancement hack. In the future, I would absolutely love to see more people make miniature versions of Kanto and even Johto, especially with more quality of life features and maybe even newer generation Pokemon. Up next is the sequel to Pokemon Platinum that takes place 20 years after the original games. In Pokemon Amatista, you'll play as a new trainer ready to receive their starter Pokemon and explore a brand new region. But your character has a bit of a backstory, as you'll have the option of playing through a prologue that takes you through your early life in the Sinnoh region, and a lot more events that are very important to the overall plot. After all that's done though, you'll be able to explore the region of Crystallis, that's filled with tons of canon Pokemon, regional variants, and even Fakemon. So yes, the Pokemon variety is incredible, as you're going to have a very easy time building a team of 6, especially being handed the EXP all very early. But this game is jam-packed with unique features, even outside of just Fakemon and new regional variants. First of all, the crafting and gathering system. While you do have the option to purchase items, you're much more encouraged to gather resources, which can be easily done by interacting with sparkling objects, and then using those resources to craft things like Pokeballs, potions, EXP candies, and much more. Although I will criticize that the resource pools felt a little bit unbalanced, giving me much more of some items I needed than others, leaving me unable to craft very much. So I do hope that does get fixed in the future. And finally, the difficulty is very customizable, because when you start the game, you'll have the option between not only 4 different difficulty modes, but also a handful of game modifiers, including a randomizer, permadeath mode, forced level caps, and much more. But Pokemon Ametista is currently a demo with around 6 hours of gameplay, so I highly suggest at least keeping your eye on it, or even giving it a try if you don't mind the short experience. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not a very big fan of Radical Red, and that's mostly because I think the default Kanto region is incredibly boring. But what if you were to take everything it has to offer and put it into the Hoenn region? That's what the hack Emerald Imperium does, as it aims to recreate the Radical Red experience with similar balance changes and harder battles. There's a big focus on quality of life here, with features such as the Pokevile, DexNav, Portable PC, Infinite Repel, and Infinite Rare Candies, to completely minimize any reason to grind, so you can just focus on the Pokemon battles. And of course, almost every Pokemon is available, with an optional randomizer mode to spice things up even more. And finally, following Pokemon, to make traversing Hoenn for the 100th time a bit more fun. I'll be honest, I don't particularly care for difficulty hacks, especially when they don't touch the region or story, but I know a lot of people do, so I thought it wouldn't hurt to put it in the video. But in a world full of enhancement hacks, it's always nice to find a ROM hack that actually takes place in a new region with a new story. In Pokemon Tourmaline, you'll travel through the region of Isho, with the goal of collecting 8 gym badges. Now, the story does claim to be a loose sequel of Pokemon Emerald, with the professor being the protagonist of the original games. But other than that, I found it to be pretty average. It's not bad, but it does play out like a normal Pokemon story. On the bright side, that does mean a smooth sailing journey through the region, without walls of text in your face around every corner. The graphics and route design were at least above average, with some new tiles to spice up the world, while still remaining true to the original style of Pokemon Emerald. However, where this game starts to fall flat is the gameplay. The difficulty of the battles themselves aren't too much of an issue. I did struggle with a few fights, but nothing crazy. Where the issues truly lie is in the level curve, where I was underleveled for most of the gym battles, even when I had already defeated every trainer beforehand. I felt like I was getting punished for not having the most optimal team ready on my first try, which isn't helped by the fact that the early Pokemon variety isn't great either. Yes, you do have options, but they aren't very good or useful ones. So I think this hack does have a lot of potential to be good, especially considering it has over 60 new moves, 20 new abilities, and even 4 new status effects, not to mention buffs to weaker Pokemon as well. I just think some time and effort does need to be put into fixing the level curve, or implementing a way to grind EXP, especially considering the game already has forced level caps. But Pokemon Tourmaline's demo currently goes up to the 6th gym, so if nothing I mentioned before bothers you as a player, then definitely give it a try. Imagine you wake up in what appears to be a crash landing site, with no memory of who you are or where you came from. That's the story of Pokemon Photon, a fan game where you're handed a starter Pokemon and with nowhere else to go, are tasked with traveling the new region. Now I'll be honest, I think the story is pretty average. It's not bad, but it didn't have any moments that really stood out to me. The same thing does kind of apply to the route design, as it's mostly made up of default tiles, with maps that feel very basically assembled. But I'll at least go ahead and say that the music choices for the routes are pretty good. Where this game really shines though is the gameplay, with a regional dex of 400 Pokemon from the first 8 generations, as well as over 40 new regional forms, and even balance changes to improve the usage of weaker Pokemon. It may not seem that impressive, but it does at least have a completed main story, with the developer promising to deliver more updates in the future. So I do hope that showcasing this game to a wider audience will encourage them to improve the game, which is the main reason why I like to include incomplete projects of a bit more average quality. Up next, we have a fan game from the developers of one of my favorite projects. A game that takes you through a unique story with much different mechanics than you're used to. This is Pokemon Reminiscenia, and it was just updated the other week, bringing in tons of new content. And if that's all you're interested in, then feel free to skip to the timestamp on screen. But first, the game takes you through a story about a man finding the human form of Lugia, washed up on the beach. Together, the two of them venture across various islands, trying to return Lugia its ability to transform into a Pokemon. So the story is pretty good. It has a very diverse cast of characters and plenty of humorous moments. But the real charm is the visuals, with beautifully animated portraits and very well put together overworlds. Rather than traveling through set routes to reach your destination, you'll instead venture through randomly generated dungeons, where you'll catch Pokemon from all 9 generations, solve puzzles, and of course battle powerful trainers. Finally, rather than leveling up your team members, every Pokemon will be on par with each other's levels, and you'll have to use heart scales to evolve them and teach them new moves. But this update comes with a plethora of new content and improvements. First, there are a handful of new animations and UI changes to make this already beautiful game look even better. But of course, there is a brand new story mode, where you'll travel to the Johto region to discover the truth of the Burnt Tower. But it also features an endless mode, with a new blessing system, where before each battle starts, you'll pick one of 3 buffs to give you an advantage. There is even a second game mode, where you'll get to interact with and learn more about most of the characters from the story, and even play various minigames with them. Overall, there's a total of about 27 hours of new content in this update. So if you're a fan of the story or gameplay of the base version, I highly recommend checking out the DLC. Last but not least is another hack that takes place in the Hoenn region, but this time with a new story, new maps, and updated graphics. In Pokemon Hyper Emerald, you'll travel through Hoenn once again, with a new story that inserts tons of characters from throughout the Pokemon series. Now, I'll be honest, the story did feel like it had potential, but it does kind of fall flat due to the oversaturation of rivals and existing characters flooding the writing. It very much felt like I was playing a ROM hack from 2012, where the creator kind of just threw random gym leaders, legendaries, and evil team members all over the story. The maps, on the other hand, are very well put together, and even though I've played through Hoenn 100 times, the updated graphics really alleviated the repetitive feelings I usually get. But where the hack truly shines is in the gameplay. Every Pokemon from the first 8 generations is available to capture, and they're all spread out very well, making it very easy to build a full team of 6. And you'll even have access to the EXP all from the very start. But one of the biggest complaints people had about this hack was the lack of an English translation in the post-game. That has apparently been fixed, according to the notes that came with the newest version released this month, which is very nice, considering that the full game contains 16 gym badges and even some further challenges afterwards. So if you want to re-explore the Hoenn region with a fresh coat of paint, I suggest checking it out. But that's going to wrap up this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and of course, I hope I was able to give you something new to play. But be sure to subscribe to keep up with the monthly series, and have a nice rest of your day.